Speaking of reliability, a podcast with good friends talking with you about reliability engineering topics.
Welcome to Speaking of Reliability. This is Kirk Gray.
Hey, Kirk, this is Fred Schenkelberg. Good to
Hey,
hear from you
Fred.
again. Hey,
good to talk to you.
Good to talk to you. It was one of the things I've run into lately, and it was one of these situations for you, the listeners that are just joining us, that Kirk and I have just spent 5 minutes talking about something, and it was like, hey, wait a second, we need to hit the record.
Well, you have a class. You're teaching a class at the University of Maryland?
I'm teaching a class at the University of Maryland. It's Reliability Engineering Management.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the key concepts in the class, and some of my students, some with experience, that are working full-time in the field as reliability folks, and others are full-time students to this point. So it's a good mix of people.
Okay.
But there's a handful of them every year. It's not just this class this year. And I run into this also when I go work with companies and clients. The different engineering groups will have this problem Well, the situation, and I'm sure you've run into it, Kirk, is you go to a company and they say, hey, we've been doing this reliability plan. We do this, this, and this, and we run this and this test, and we pass this and this, and then we still have problems, right? and he says, we've been doing it for years, and in the last couple of cycles, it's gotten worse and worse. So we need some help figuring out what to do. And so one of the things, and I know you do this too, is, well, what are you trying to achieve? What's your business model? Are you here to make profit, or are you here to do
Right.
Is it through customer satisfaction? Is it through low price? Is it delivery on time? Is it cool functionality? What is it you're trying to accomplish here?
And is reliability a significant factor in your customers' use, or is it product so inexpensive and available that they can just replace it and it doesn't?
They don't even tell you about it.
Yeah. They don't even tell you about it. They throw it away.
So what are you trying to achieve? How do you know you got a problem with reliability?
Exactly. How do you know you have a problem with reliability? What do you see in the field? What are the customers saying is failing? What is not working? Maybe it's a misapplication of your product. Maybe it's...
it could go all kinds of maps, but the issue is that the problem I run into is that when we suggest doing FMEA or HALT or any reliability-ish type activity, like design for reliability or any of this stuff, right? Any of them,
right?
If it doesn't connect to what you're trying to do as a business, are you trying to improve reliability, or are you trying to become more stable? Or are you trying to, launch this new product on time? If it's not connected to that in a useful way, it actually helps achieve that objective, the chance of what you're doing being less than useful is pretty good. Well, you've seen it. People will do HALT and then nobody reads the report. Nobody takes any action on the findings.
No.
So like, why did you run the HALT?
Exactly. There's a lot of people wasting their time finding limits and not doing anything about them if they're low the fundamental is having to show through detailed, information. First of all, using their own products and looking at the cause of the failure, and then showing that how overstressing or high levels of stress could have brought that out very quickly before it appeared in the field. That's, just fundamental. And then the question is, does that company keep track of their warranty expense or their costs?
Well, I had one of them that just kept track of the cost of the replacement parts. That was their total reported warranty expense, and it was like $50,000.
Right, and we all know that.
Yeah, they were missing 3/4 of it.
Probably a minor part of their total over cost to the loss of future sales, other things that are really difficult to quantify. But they're much.
They didn't even count that they had to expand their manufacturing by almost 2x just to make enough products for replacements.
That's great. They sell 2 for every one.
Three. They were selling 3 for every one.
But if they pay for those and it's a warranty cost, and
it was, and they, the argument was, it's still good enough profit margin.
Well, I've actually been with medical equipment companies that say that 50% of their product was failing, and I'm thinking, well, That's not good. Well,
That's
we
good.
still make a lot of
We
money,
still make a lot of money, but yeah, has your sales gotten more expensive to bring a new hospital online, or are you losing repeat sales? And like, oh yeah, how'd you know? Well, when your product doesn't work, they're not
Right.
going to use it.
But underlying all this, Fred, is understanding why it's failing in the field.
Oh yeah.
If you can then show those methods, FMEA, halt has, whatever, the different testing techniques would have brought that problem out, then it certainly you can balance the cost of that testing operation, testing
Well,
equipment,
then
whatever
you could
you
measure
do,
it, but
with the cost of the field
oh
returns.
right, and you can estimate or actually measure and calculate a return on an investment. But here's the issue
Right.
I run into is that let's say, and this is, uh, uh, it was in Houston. It was a company in Houston, and they were
Yes.
making stuff, and they were implementing Halt or some variant of it, and this director of engineering is complaining. Is says, yeah, we're required to send 2 prototypes down there, every cycle and whatever, and they break it. And then I
Yeah.
get this massive report, all these pictures talking about all the
Yeah.
ways it can fail. And he was the classic argument. Well, of course it failed. They overstressed it. It's way out of spec. So
Right.
beside the points of just Halt, right? One, they took no action on the reports. And I said, so do you get reports from field failures? Oh yeah, we get them all the time, and then we work on those. And so, how much of your engineering staff is spent fixing field problems? Is
Right.
design staff, not as sustainers or
Right.
anybody else? He goes, oh, almost 50% of our time is fixing previous problems. Like about half my staff is fixing things once it's found in the field. And
Hmm.
customers, you never know what they're going to do. And he was kind of
Right.
waving it off, and I said, let's take a look at this Halt report that you got on this product that you have all this data on. And
Right.
it was 9 out of the 10 were in the report on like very early in the development phase. And he
That
goes,
the
oh, look,
failures are seen in the field.
yeah.
Right.
And
Okay.
he had it on his desk. He was using those reports to hold his door open. He
Right.
never opened them. He just thought the whole thing was full. And all I did was say, like, and you've done it, and you even talk about this a lot, and I probably learned it from you, is take a look at what you're seeing in the field and what you get on the Halt,
Exactly.
and it does it replicate it. And he was like, and I
Exactly.
said, now, if you would have suspected that these same failure mechanisms would have happened in the field, would you have done anything? Oh, yeah, sure. Well, then I was like ready to just yell at him. I was like, well, read the damn report.
Right.
The process works. But
Right. But you have to have somebody at the top that understands. You have to have
yeah,
management understand. And that's the first thing I always say. You've got to have a top down education because it does take samples, extra samples. It does take extra units. There is a cost to testing, but it's always a trade, it's
it's an
always
investment.
an investment. And also, like my first very successful consulting client, which was a large precision power supply company or a relatively small. Anyway, they had a CEO that had been an engineer building these power supplies
Mm-hmm.
at one time, designing and building them. And we had, before I started consulting with them or had the contract and started working with them for many months, we had about an hour meeting in the chief executive's officer's office. I had a meeting with him, just one on one. And with us, we had the failure analysis reports of loose screws, uh, loose connectors, bad solder joints. And, I said, well, I've reviewed this. We've looked at it, and my experience shows that, vibration and thermal cycling would have helped find these very quickly, and that,
The
you
sooner you
know
find
what it
it, the sooner
costs
you can
you.
go figure it out. Yeah.
Exactly. And the cost here of what it's costing you, which is quite expensive, but be more expensive was to the customer if a power supply that was doing chemical vapor deposition
Yeah. Yeah.
or sputtering or something like that. If it failed in the middle of a process, you could destroy $1 million worth of silicon wafers, silicon microprocessors
Yeah.
in a batch. And so, the cost was much more than the device.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, later they removed a thermal interlock because they said it was better for power supply to catch fire and finish the batch.
Oh,
Cost
really?
yeah,
That's pretty.
$6,000 for the power supply versus maybe $1 million for
There's
the batch
wafers
of
sitting in
wafers.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing.
So, but having him understand and then presenting it to his whole executive board in about a 2 hour brief or 1 hour brief overview
Hmm.
of the methodology and the approach was enough to now clear the way, because later I did have challenges with the engineering management lower below.
Yeah.
When I blew up,
Because
when
they're looking at their personal budget. Because we've got a deadline, and I only have so many man hours to
exactly,
get it done, and then you're going to take
exactly,
my prototypes away, and this and that, and and then you're gonna come back and tell me I have more things I got to go fix, and I'm like, yep,
right.
that's the way it works.
So this is one where it wasn't easy. It was a very challenging thing to have changed, because when we took one of these 6 kilowatt power supplies up in Hall Thermal, there were three different samples we had, and they failed at one was at maybe very low temperature relatively,
Hmm.
about 35, 40 C, I think, and
That
then
shouldn't happen. Yeah.
one of them got all the way to 90 C. But the failure mode was splitting this 3-inch by 2-inch, uh, 500-volt bipolar transistor housing.
Hmm.
Okay. And when I talked to the engineering manager about increasing that wattage, in other words, basically using a
Derating that part. Yeah. So it has
derating the
more
part,
robust.
instead of 100 watt, putting a 150-watt part in there. He said, "Hey, look at this. I never get these power supplies back from the field with this, uh,
This mechanism on it. Yeah.
yeah, blown up." He says, "That's not a relevant failure." And I said, "Well, you're right. It may not fail this way in the field, but the distribution of this function is quite wide. And also, it prevents us from doing a very good thermal screening of the rest of the assembly." So I said, let's just try, because the 150-watt part was identical in physical
So
layout,
you could
shape.
just drop it right in and
Exactly.
yeah. And
So I
probably
dropped it right
enhance their
in.
performance too.
I think we used the same power supply because that was the weak link. And
Yeah.
so we didn't feel like we had damaged anything in the rest of the power supply. But we dropped it in, and lo and behold, we got about a 30 degree C increase in the average upper destruct limit,
Hmm.
which was also the operating limit. They happen to coincide.
Yeah.
Sometimes that happens.
Yeah. No, but it's amazing to me is when once you, I mean, having senior manager to flying cover for you works. Now, a lot of us don't have that opportunity. And so
Oh,
you're sitting there as an engineer or as a technician or whoever, and
right.
you say, we really need to do this. Halt would this kind of stuff where I just came back from this conference. We want to try it.
Right. And a lot of the guys at the lower levels, especially the ones that are in, when I go to some of the contractors I've been to, military and basically DOD,
Mm.
the guys in the test labs that are doing the ESS, environmental stress screening, as required
Yeah.
by the the mill standard days and stuff. Anyway, which is not very stressful. It's kind of minimal stress. They see all these things fall out even at the low level
Hmm.
stress. So they know that this methodology of going to higher level stresses and building in margin is really, so you're preaching to the choir down there.
I know, but the issue is that what you did by making the business connection of,
Right,
if we have these kinds of issues
right,
and we don't look for them and or ignore them for whatever reason,
right.
we're going to pay for it, big time when it gets to the field, which you are doing now. So the business cases, do halt, find these issues, fix them in your design and in your
Huh,
process early. And here's how that reduces your failure rates in the field and then your cost per failure and so on. You can figure that out. But
right.
the overall concept is that, like the DOD guys, every time I talk to them, it says, why aren't you doing this a useful thing? It says, well, this is required and we don't have any funding to do anything that's not
Right.
required.
And they have a very big conflict of interest in the fact that spares, and they've told me this. I mean,
Oh,
people
yeah.
that
Not all of the
prevalent
groups
said
do,
not
but most do.
maybe not all of them, but I know this is part of the culture, and that is that their program profit 60% are derived from spare parts and service.
Yeah.
So that is a direct conflict of interest with building a reliable product early on.
Yeah.
And also, they many times get paid extra to
To do
improve.
fixes. Yeah. You don't want to make it too good
And
because we'll
commercial
lose all our
manufacturers
money.
don't,
Yeah.
right. Commercial manufacturers don't have the customers pay.
You know, what I found though is that the organizations that play that in the military sphere and contracting and stuff that hide behind the contract and that's
Right.
the way it is and then they work it so they make some money.
Right.
They don't stay in business long. I mean, some of the big ones, they just buy everybody else and there's nowhere else to go.
Sure.
But I've run into all kinds of different communication boxes and controlling boxes and all kinds of other, mostly electronics I've run into, that if they try to play that game so they maximize their profits doing repairs or change orders, somebody comes along with a better technology or a service that actually gets the project done better and costs everybody less money. And then so these other ones, they just go out of business. If your product really doesn't work, you're not going to last long.
Right. To some point, if it does fail, 70% of them fail, you're going to have a hard time convincing the customer, no matter who they are, that this is worth pursuing.
The main point is that I think, you know, at any level in the organization, if you make, especially reliability engineers, if you're trying to get justification to do halt or you want the extra spares to go do this or convince a design manager to actually read and take action on what's being found, is you have to connect it to business, whether it's field failures or delay of a program or whatever. You got to connect it to money because that's the only thing that, in my experience, that really matters. Telling wonderful stories is not. So I was working with.
You got to do your homework. You got to dig in and look before you start screaming about it. You got to find out if it's a problem. I mean, halt and hash and some of these techniques aren't really going to be cost effective against, say, we now have electronics, a speaker, a battery, everything, and a greeting card, and it's sold what, $5-10 or something like that. And I've pulled them out years later, you know, and opened them up, and they're still operating. You know, it still turns on the music or plays a tune, and that's pretty complex little device for, you know, but it doesn't really justify. I mean, I might do something like a thermal test because you want to make sure it passes storage and stuff like that.
I would run it through a mail sorter a bunch of times because it squeezes it and flexes it. So I'd use that as the test.
Some things I would test for, certainly. But I wouldn't do a screening, or I wouldn't do a lot of things that, I mean, it's really up to the product and the value to the customer, the cost of the product, cost of failure. If it's a safety issue, of course.
Yeah, you deal with it. But a greeting card, I mean, if that little thing caught on fire because of a short, then that would be an issue. No. So last night I was talking to one of my neighbors. We pull water from a local creek, and we have our own treatment plant in our community. And there's like 150 homes, something like that. Yeah, so it's not but that's what we've been doing since this area started. And so he was looking at, there was some grant money they were looking at, and they're trying to increase the amount of storage, another big tank. They wanted to add another. And we've been talking about this for like 20 years in the community to add and it's just for, you know, for fire safety. So we have enough water. If there's a fire, we could actually move a lot of water. And it also with the extra storage, then we can take a look at our older tanks. We have 3 tanks up on the hill and 3 separate silo type looking tanks of water. Right. And he was thinking, you know, why don't we just replace that with one great big tank? And he said it would be way less expensive. It'd be all this other stuff. We could just have one big tank. And I said, do you really think about this?
Yeah.
You know, tanks fail.
Exactly. And they corrode.
Yeah.
They leak sometimes.
Yeah. We've had every one of our tanks, you know, fail one other time or another, but we could isolate it, and the other storage we have would maintain our system. And
redundancy.
Yeah. And we live in earthquake range,
Right.
so if that tank gets blown out, how long will it take us to replace that tank if it's that big, if that's the idea? Why don't we
Yeah.
make 4 pads up there and have
Right.
2 different locations? And
Right.
he says, why do you think about all this stuff all the time? He says, it's the way I work.
Yeah. Kind of experience, kind of like decades.
Yeah. And so it was a good conversation. But they're looking at getting, I don't know, like $1 million grant to upgrade all our water system, all kinds of weird stuff on it. So hopefully that'll happen. We'll get our system.
Well, it's kind of the argument that a lot of the solar panel companies, whether to have a central inverter because it's
or distribute
more
it,
efficient, or have a distributed inverters on each panel, which is more, possibly reliable. So there's always trade-offs, and but you're talking about either redundancy, having multiple other alternative tanks.
Yeah, we could run in degraded mode, or
having one tank, which would be easier to maintain as far as the motors and everything around it, as opposed to all the others. So, yeah, it's always trade-offs.
There's always trade-offs and cost.
And it's a business case. And ultimately it comes down to money.
It does.
It's not just hey, this is for the good of the product or whatever. It's if it doesn't matter to the field and it doesn't matter to the customer, then it is a waste of money.
Yeah. We don't need, 5 levels of redundancy on our pumps because we can replace a pump in a day. And if we have the spare, right? And, the likelihood of 4 pumps failing and only the 5th one drags us through is very, very rare. Plus we have all kinds of considerations. But anyway, the point is if what we do is not connected to a business objective, or in customer satisfaction might be the primary goal, or product quality might be a primary goal, or whatever it is, it's got to be connected to that. Otherwise you're just, spinning your wheels and being busy, but not adding value.
You're not adding value, and you certainly can't sell that. So that's the fundamentals is when somebody asks me, can you help us improve our reliability? And I say, well, can I look at your failures? And that's the first thing I'd say to anybody out there and all your students is, first of all, you can't see them unless you're internally allowed and signed an NDA.
Well, there's even in companies, they say, well, our product is, it fails a lot and it costs too much to ship them all back. So we almost never get any back.
Okay.
Yeah, I've run into that.
Do you have a final test after assembly? Can I look at those?
Oh, no, because we suspect it's overstressing it. So we stopped doing that test. And so we figured it was damaging.
Okay.
No, these guys were needed to do big time. They were hurting. But anyway, the idea is for whatever we do, it's not just because you can. It's not just because we've always done it that way. It's because it makes a difference. It adds information or insights that we didn't otherwise have, and you got to connect it. So anyway, that's I think, Kirk, we got probably another 2 hours worth of stories on this topic, so we better wrap it up a little bit. So thanks for listening, and besides listening, I highly encourage you as a listener to get in touch with us. Let us know what your take is on this. How do you pick what activities to say and you're going to propose, or how do you justify it? And how does this work for you? Or what kind of hurdles have you run into? Head over to accendoreliability.com/go/SOR. And you can find a couple of ways to get in touch with us. Kirk and I and the other hosts are all available through LinkedIn and our About pages on Accendo. And no doubt a bunch of other ways too. We're sincerely look forward to your feedback and comments and questions. And so we look forward to that.
You bet.
So with that, Kirk, let's keep on the good fight and help folks do better work. And we all benefit from that.
Sounds good, Fred. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you later. Cheers. Thanks for listening to Speaking of Reliability. We invite you to join the conversation. If you have a question or a topic that you think we should discuss in a future show, please let us know. You can find a comment box below the episode show notes, or just leave a note as part of a review on iTunes.